Okay, so it has just gone 5 o'clock, so I'm just going to make a start. Welcome everyone to Café Research. I hope you're all doing well. We've got 3 wonderful speakers for you here today, electronically through the online mechanisms that we have. And I'm just going to give a short introduction to what's going to happen and how the event's going to run. Just for your information, we do have regular events at the Doctoral College, and there's just a few dates on screen here for ones coming up. So in September, we'll have a doctoral inaugural lectures session where previous graduates return and talk about what they've been doing. In November, we'll have another Café Research. On the 17th of November, on the 24th of November, we have Images of Research, which is where we ask our researchers to submit an image to an exhibition, which best describes what they're working on. It's a really interesting event, so definitely a date for the diary. And then in February next year, we'll have Doctoral College Week. So again, just some information on saving some dates there for future events with the Doctoral College. So today with the Café Research event, there's just a few pointers that can make your experience a bit better, which is to keep your mic and your video off as to not disrupt the speakers. Oh, I've skipped a slide. There we go. The session is currently being recorded so that there's people that can't attend today and will be back on catch up, watching it back on catch up. So we've recorded it for that reason. So keep your cameras off if you don't want to be shown onto that. And if you have an issue during the session, please use the chat function as to not interrupt the speaker. I will be controlling the chat function, so I can deal with any technical issues or things like that. And do feel free to ask questions during the chat when the speaker is presenting, and we will get to them afterwards and have a conversation about it. Do feel free to use the chat function throughout the session today. We'd love to know where you're tuning in from. And if you do anything on social media, then feel free to use the hashtag of the Doctoral College. So today's speakers, it's not going to skip, is it? No, it's all good. So we have 3 speakers for you today. They all have about 15 minutes each. We have Emily Harper, we have Robert, and we have Andrew. You can see their titles there on the screen. However, I am also going to put information into the chat whilst they're speaking, so you can read back on that. So that's all from me, just as a short little intro. I'm now going to stop sharing my screen, and whilst I do that, I'm going to ask Emily, our first speaker, to start sharing her slides. While she does that, I've just got a short intro to read out regarding Emily, so I'll do that now. Let's switch these screens over. So yeah, Emily, if you want to get ready and start sharing. Emily is a 4th-year PhD student working in the Department of Genetics and Genome Biology. Her research investigates how the body clock could be used to reduce radiotherapy side effects. Currently, she is working on the data collection stage of her research and is hoping to disseminate her findings by the end of the year. After studying at the university for over 7 years now, Emily is keen to use the skills and knowledge she has developed to focus more on public engagement and science communication to make science more accessible to non-specialists. So whenever you're ready, Emily, take it away.
Okay, cool. So I'm just double checking you can hear and see my slides.
Yep, we can hear and see your slides.
Okay, amazing. So hi everybody, and thanks Kelly and to the Doctoral College for having me here to speak today. So I'm going to be talking for the next 10 to 15 minutes about my research on chronoradiotherapy. And what I mean by that is how we might be able to reduce radiotherapy side effects by using the body's clock. So just a quick overview of how my talk is going to go today. So I will give a brief introduction about the importance of radiotherapy as a treatment for cancer patients and the importance of the body clock for human health. I'm going to briefly go over the methods that I'm using in my work and then discuss how this may impact future research in cancer care. And then I'll end with some acknowledgements and obviously, as Kelly said, a chance for some questions as well. So first, I wanted to start with some breast cancer statistics for the UK. So cancer survival has improved massively. I think I have to really say this within the last 40 to 50 years. In the 1970s, women surviving breast cancer for 10 years or more after their diagnosis was only 4 in 10. Today, that's around 80% now, which is obviously amazing. And that's down to improvements in diagnosis and screening, and obviously the advancements in technology to improve cancer treatment. So women having breast cancer treatment will typically be offered surgery, radiotherapy, or chemotherapy. And normally they will have a combination of all or some of these, depending on the pathology of their breast cancer. At the moment, surgery is still the most common treatment type for breast cancer because it offers the best chance of cure. But obviously, surgery comes with the risks associated with going under the knife. So it's not always the best treatment option for all patients. Similarly, chemotherapy has a lot of risks in that it puts a huge toll on the body. So at the moment, radiotherapy is favoured over chemotherapy, and actually it represents around 40% of breast cancer cures, radiotherapy does. But it still comes with some issues. There's still side effects that patients can have from radiotherapy, and that's what I'm interested in, particularly for my research. So just a little bit now about radiotherapy side effects, particularly for breast cancer patients. So side effects from radiotherapy can occur during treatment. These are quite common. Patients will get tired during the radiotherapy treatment. They might have some skin reddening, which is similar to a sunburn at the site of their radiotherapy treatment. This skin reddening might blister or peel. And if this gets too bad, then treatment might be interrupted for a short amount of time, just to let the patient recover. What I'm interested in more is the side effects that occur after treatment, and these will develop over the years after treatment and even after the cancer has disappeared. These are not as common. They typically affect less than 15% of patients, but they are quite severe and can affect a patient's quality of life massively. They're quite difficult to predict as well, whether a patient will develop these late side effects. So the next slide I'm going to show you does include some pictures of these side effects. So if you are particularly sensitive, then you might want to look away for the next few moments, and then I'll let you know when to look again. So these pictures aren't nice, but I wanted to include them to get across how severe some of these side effects can be, how debilitating they can be, and how it really does impact a patient's quality of life. On the left-hand side, we have some more, some less severe side effects. So some skin reddening, some spider veins have formed underneath the skin. And I've got pictures as well of women that have experienced this skin peeling and blistering. The bottom right-hand side is two pictures where this lady has developed some scarring underneath the skin. Some hard lumps of scar tissue have formed close to the nipple and in the armpit. So as well as having a negative cosmetic effect, this can be quite debilitating in terms of mobility, especially if it's in the armpit. And then the picture in the top right is probably the most shocking photo. I remember seeing this when I first started my PhD. And you can see this lady here has got quite severe breast atrophy. So what I mean by that is breast shrinkage. And although the picture is in black and white, I think it's quite clear, that she has got reddening. The breast is probably hot to touch and quite painful. And this must really impact her quality of life, even though she's, a cancer survivor now. So if you've looked away for that last slide, then it is now safe to look back. So hopefully I have, shown you that radiotherapy side effects are worth talking about, and lots of researchers and clinicians now are dedicating a lot of time to try and figure out those patients that are most at risk of side effects and how we can reduce side effects. And some of the interesting work recently has found that patients that receive their radiotherapy at a particular time of day may help their side effects. Okay, so where has this whole idea come from, first of all? Well, in the late 80s, this was first sort of found when looking at chemotherapy drugs. So a chemotherapy drug, cisplatin, was found to worsen survival and damage the kidneys if it was delivered at a particular time of day. Then over 20 years later was the first study into radiotherapy side effects. And this group looked at patients treated either in the morning or the afternoon for their radiotherapy, and found that patients treated in the morning for head and neck cancers had significantly less severe side effects. So obviously the time of treatment is important, and is important for treatment outcomes. Since then, around 17 studies have been done in humans, which look at how time of day can affect radiotherapy side effects. But there are so many variables between these studies, different patient groups, different parts of the world that these have been carried out in, different ways that the radiotherapy has been delivered, and different cancers, which means it is really, really hard to compare studies. And at the moment, there is no consensus on whether radiotherapy delivered at a particular time of day does offer better treatment outcomes. So to sort of understand a little bit more why radiotherapy side effects might be changed depending on the time of treatment, we need to have a little look at the body clock. So everybody has a body clock, and what I mean by that is a body rhythm of around about 24 hours, so a day in length. So when we wake up in the morning, light enters our eyes and sends signal to the brain to reset this body clock, this biological clock. And those signals from the brain then get transmitted to the rest of the body and essentially regulates all physiological processes in the body. So body temperature, digestion, blood pressure are a few examples. It is driven by a set of core clock genes. So everybody has this same set of core clock genes, which ultimately drives the body clock. But there'll be slight variations in the DNA between people, which means there's slight variations between people in their body rhythms, which is why some people are morning people, some people are evening people. We all have different sleep patterns, and that's all due to slight variation, normal variation in our DNA in those clock genes. So I think that sort of shows how important body clocks are for your health. But another way to look at it is if our body clocks become disrupted, this can have a hugely detrimental impact on our health. Probably the most common example I can think of that we've all likely to have experienced, especially over the past year or so with working from home, is this exposure to blue light from screens at night. And this can disrupt our body clock, because the exposure of blue light at night suppresses a hormone called melatonin, which is known as the sleepy hormone. So melatonin is what makes us feel sleepy in the evening and get ready to bed. So when we are exposed to blue light in the evening, this can then cause problems falling asleep and sleep disturbances. Some of us may also have disrupted our body clocks when we've travelled across different time zones, which causes jet lag. And again, we can have problems with sleep mainly, but can also have problems with digestion and focus too. And then another one, which I think is quite important to know, is that when we disrupt our body clock through lifestyle, so an example is shift work, this can cause similar effects as jet lag can. And actually, the World Health Organization has listed shift work as a probable carcinogen, i.e. cancer causing, because the disruption that shift work can cause to your body clock can increase your chances of developing cancer later in life. So I think that really does show the importance of body clocks, and it does show that there is a really good chance that there is a best time of day for radiotherapy. And if we can find that time of day for radiotherapy and treat patients at that time, then we can hopefully reduce side effects and give them a better quality of life. So this does actually raise more questions, and some of those are, could all patients benefit from having treatment at a particular time of day? What time is best? Do all patients have the same best time of day? And why is this time of day best? So what is the biological mechanism underneath all of this? And that's really where my PhD comes in. So I'm really interested in looking at how skin cells respond to radiotherapy, so that we can, at different times of day, so that we can understand more about the biology that's going on there, and obviously try and answer some of these questions. So the main bulk of my work is looking at human and mouse models. So I've been obtaining skin biopsies from humans and mice and extracting fibroblast cells from them. So fibroblast cells are a key cell type in the skin, and they're really key in the pathology of some of those side effects that I spoke about earlier. And what I'm doing is I'm growing them and then, exposing them to radiation at different times of day to mimic radiotherapy given at different times of day. And then I'm using various assays to look at how the time that these cells have been irradiated affects the cell growth and death and how the DNA gets damaged and repaired. And the main sort of point of this part of my work is, as I've said, to try and understand which cellular responses are affected by radiotherapy given at a time of day to help us answer those questions previously. I am also doing a smaller sort of side project on Drosophila, which are, fruit flies. And you may be thinking, why am I looking at fruit flies? They are very, very different to humans. I realise that. But actually, fruit flies are really good model organisms for understanding the body clock. And a lot of the clock genes that flies have, we have very similar ones. So looking at the body clock in flies can actually tell us quite a lot about the body clock in humans. And so by irradiating flies at different times of day to mimic radiotherapy at different times of day, I can then track their development and survival to try and help us answer some of these questions and get a bit of a bigger picture. So at the moment, I'm really in the thick of my data collection. We are getting patient biopsies through, and I am currently, exposing those cells to radiation to see how this affects different outcomes. Hopefully, within the next couple of months, we will be able to understand a little bit more about the biological mechanisms that are responsible for this time of day effect that I've talked about. Hopefully that will help us to answer what patients might be at most at risk and the time of day that is best to deliver radiotherapy, to ultimately inform a big clinical trial where we will have patients having radiotherapy at different times of day and then assess over the following years how their side effects are. Hopefully as well that I've highlighted that this is a massively cheap and effective way of improving cancer care. We don't need to develop any drugs, design any new drugs, or try and advance technology used to deliver radiotherapy. This is just a case of rescheduling radiotherapy. And it has, massive implications for improving quality of life in these patients. And because survival rates are high right now and still increasing, it is really important that we are starting to think about how a patient is living after their cancer diagnosis and survival. I am going to end there by thanking my research team and the technical staff that have been involved, but obviously the patients that have kindly donated skin biopsies for my research, and my funders as well, Hope Against Cancer. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Emily. Really well presented, really enjoyable listen. And just thank you very much for doing that. I can't see any questions in the chat. So what we're going to do is move on to Robert, who's our next speaker. So Robert, if you want to get your slides ready and start sharing. But if you do have any questions for Emily, then by all means you can add them into the chat and we will come back around once all of our speakers are done. So while Robert gets started, I'm just going to do a short introduction for him. So Robert is speaking from the UK and is in his first year. He has substantive experience in project management, research, leading development projects for young people not in education, employment or training, which is also known as NEET, and those from poor, challenging socio-economic backgrounds. He has led on impact evaluation in both the public and charity sector, mainly within England and Wales. Of particular interest to him are social interventions, especially focused on youth development, education, transitions into work, employability skills, human rights, health and well-being. So Robert, if you're ready, feel free to take it away. I think you're still on mute. Oh, you got it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm in my first year. And I'm keen to kind of share my current progress and thinking around my research topic. Now, the presentation is going to cover, the introduction to the research topic itself and its aims, the key concepts involved, the emerging conceptual framework. I'm going to talk a little bit about methodology, and also about the relevance of the research. and I'm quite happy to take questions as I go along, so we don't have to wait until the end, just in case people have got burning questions. So, so the topic of my research topic is really around understanding the role of social prescribing in the transitions into work of young people who are categorized or known as not being in employment, education, or training, and the acronym for that is NEET. And I'm trying to understand this within the global pandemic context, in this case, COVID. And I'm taking a case study approach, looking at the experiences of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic NEET young people in Leicester. And it's because it's got significant numbers of young people who are categorized as NEET. The research aims, my research aims are to explore the role of social prescribing as an intervention mechanism in the transitions into work for these young people. But as I said, within the global context, that's the first one. The second one is to critically examine the nature of the relationship between social prescribing models and BAME young people's experiences of transitioning into work. And the third is to understand the influences of the COVID-19 global pandemic on the outcomes social prescribing delivers in the lives of BAME young people in transition into employment in the UK. So a little bit of background. So the research here is bringing two policy areas together. The first is let me just move this down. The first is social prescribing, and the second is youth transitions. And in particular, youth employment is what I'm focusing on. And this is, as I said, this is all within the context of the global pandemic, which is the current one that we're facing, which is COVID-19. So what is social prescribing? Now, social prescribing is a mechanism through which people can now access support. This is not just for young people. Anyone can access support, either in terms of their health and well-being, more specifically, but also are related to that aspects which feed into health and social and well-being. So, for example, the aspect of work. So social prescribing is a non-medical intervention. And research shows that 2 out of every 10 people who visit a GP don't actually need medical intervention. It's more social aspects, for example. So social prescribing is a mechanism that's used now in the UK and elsewhere in the world, where if someone has got particular challenges, they can be referred through to community organizations to kind of support them. So, for example, someone who might be suffering from depression might be referred to a knitting group if they've got an interest in knitting, for example, or an art group. Equally, it might be a young person who's suffering from depression because they're unemployed, they've struggled because they've got poor or low or no qualifications after their time in education. So they might be referred to a community organization that is supporting young people through preparing them for work, encouraging them to improve their for example, their skills, such as, for example, literacy and numeracy, which would then help them to get into employment. But through that process of kind of socializing them with other young people and supporting them in terms of their mental health well-being, through that process, young people then can benefit from it and come out of that depression situation once they start employment, sometimes through routes such as volunteering initially, and then eventually through a work experience and eventual employment. So that is social prescribing, and there's a range of mechanisms in between that enable that to happen. So GPs can be the main social prescribers, but you can also have other community prescribers who can do that. And related to them are link workers who then connect these young people who would have been referred, in this case, to particular services or organizations that are working to support young people in that way, or indeed adults. Whereas on the other hand, when I talk about youth transitions, this is really the concept of that, all of us, we move from being a young person, as it were, in a youth into adulthood. And the concept really here that I'm using in my research is one of adulthoods rather than adulthood. So this is borrowed from or was proposed by a researcher called Riley, who argues that, you know, in terms of that transition, you know, there isn't one concept of adulthood here that we move towards, but a series of adulthoods. So in other words, you can become economically an adult or legally an adult, but you don't have you're not economically or an adult because you can't support yourself, or you can't even, you know, kind of look after yourself and live independently, for example. So and also the concept acknowledges that this is not a, you know, a unidirectional event, if you want. You know, so, you know, people move at different paces, and there's concepts here about yo-yoing. So sometimes you go up and you come back, you know, in terms of you might gain adulthood in a particular type of adult and then leave it and then lose it. Some of the issues that feed into this are aspects such as risk. So the research in youth transition suggests that, you know, compared to, you know, over the years, over the decades, risk has increased and precarity in terms of young people. So this is called the changing times consensus, that, you know, because of social upheaval, because of economic upheaval, for example, that the transitions from education to employment are much more challenging. And one of the outcomes of that is we've seen new concepts being used to describe, you know, young people who are out of employment. So in the past, everyone was just saying, well, they are not in employment, they are not in work, so they're unemployed. But there's concepts such as being NEET that are now used, which means not employment, educational training. And that's a key concept that I'm using in my research. So I'm looking to understand how these young people who, because of these risks that they're facing as a challenge in their transitions to adulthood, are as an impact, you know, resulting in them becoming unemployed and having, you know, kind of psychological challenges, emotional challenges, which then lead them to present at GPs, from where they then get, you know, referred through the social subscribing concept. So it brings together the social prescribing aspect and youth transitions, and trying to understand in particular how young people from, you know, Black, ethnic and Asian and ethnic minority backgrounds, you know, they're experiencing within the social prescribing system, as it were. So, you know, I'm looking particularly at Leicester, as I said, because it's got quite high numbers of young people who are NEET. It's you know, I don't like the term NEET myself because it's pejorative. It describes young people by what they are not rather than what they can be. But, you know, it's a concept that I'm using. But I'm also looking at the concept of BAME itself and the contested nature of that term. This is all part of the research itself. So in terms of the context, the backdrop of the research, which is COVID-19, we've seen a disproportionate impact on BAME communities. And one of the concepts within youth transitions, when you're looking at the factors that are quite important in supporting young people's positive transitions into adulthood, one of the key concepts is around family. So the family is seen as a key factor in determining positive or negative transitions. So some families can incubate negative behavior such as truancy, you know, people who actually don't take up employment. And when there's shocks within those families, such as the ones that have been caused by COVID-19 in these BAME communities, we see higher levels of unemployment, for example, within the communities. We see higher levels of deaths and also mental health challenges. And as a result of that, the family, which is supposed to be, which provides an important bedrock for young people's transitions, has also been kind of negatively impacted. So I'm understanding, you know, that how that aspect of COVID-19 interplays with other factors that, you know, such as risk, as I talked about, such as the challenges within the labor market, such that even now graduates are struggling to get into employment. You know, those, and they become the new needs. So all those are part of the some of the aspects that I'm looking at as part of the research. So I'm very much at the beginning of my research, and I've got a conceptual framework here which I'm starting, which is emerging, which is really informed by the interplay of what we would term structural and individual factors. So the structural factors are, for example, the fact that there's more competition in the labor market now, that there's a shrinking labor market, certainly in the context of COVID, but also the fact that the family itself as a structure is having these challenges, which then have an impact on the individual itself. The individual factors are things like low or poor educational outcomes, which mean that it's more challenging for these young people to compete on the labor market itself. But there are also aspects such as inequality within the community, within the society, how that plays into the factors that then lead to young people becoming NEET, as it were, and then the role of social prescribing in trying to intervene and mitigate some of the impact of these of the outcome of these of that interplay, as it were. So social prescribing really becomes a key aspect, and social prescribing in terms of policy has emerged as a key mechanism that is being promoted now to support and intervene, to support young people into employment and into work, because it's the rate of young people in the UK who is increasing, who are NEET. So to date, we are looking at just under 1 million young people who are considered not employment, education, training, and that number is predicted to rise because of the impact of COVID. More young people have lost their jobs, for example. As I said, in BAME communities, the impact has been significantly worse compared to other ethnicities within our community, within our society, and so all that plays in, and is one of the key things that I'll be looking at. So very quickly, I'm going to just talk a little bit about the methods that I'm using. So it's a mixed methods approach, using a combination of qualitative and quantitative methods. I'm going to use purposive sampling. And some of the participants I'm looking to interview are health workers such as GPs, social prescribers, community social prescribers, the BAME young people themselves, link workers, community organizations that are leading in providing social care, social prescribing services, for example. And as I said, I'm in my first year, early days, and I'm looking to fully scope out the project in this first year, do in-depth literature review, drafting of the literature review itself, network with stakeholders, something that I've already done. I've attended a few conferences, develop methodology and conduct a pilot by the end of the year. Phase 2 is data collection and the first part of data analysis. The third year is really about data analysis, the second phase of that, and writing up the thesis, with the fourth year being really focused on submission and the viva itself. So in terms of the last point, the policy context and research relevance here is something that I briefly want to talk about. So given the as I said, the challenges, the growing mental health challenges, for example, and health challenges generally, and more so with COVID, it's important that we consider this very important mechanism of social prescribing, which is relatively new, but which has been adopted by the Department of Health and Social Care as a key policy now in terms of. And there's an aspiration to refer at least 900,000 people through social prescribing by 2024. And clearly, as I said, it's now being used to intervene in young people, young people's transitions into employment, with some examples being pilots that have been run in Doncaster, for example, where outcomes, where some of the outcomes included improved sense of self-efficacy, self-esteem, confidence, and obviously with some people finding employment. So I think I'll stop here for now. Hopefully it makes sense. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Robert. Yeah, lots to do before 2024. Lots of impact. So yeah, really interesting research.